Hey everybody, welcome back to another Nature's Always Right episode. I am crazy excited about today's episode because we are at my best friend Jared Smith's farm, Jared's Real Food, out in Lakeside, California. This is going to be part of my new video series where I'm going to be visiting a lot of different market gardeners, farmers, agripreneurs, and different people that are doing awesome things in the world of small and sustainable agriculture. So if you've heard my story before, this is the farm that I got started at, where I got all my first experience here with Jared. So we're gonna get to hear the story about how we got started. Jared's gonna give us a lot of different insights, how he got started, the different techniques that he uses here at the farm, and how he's also doing everything as naturally as possible. All right guys, very excited and honored to be here. Let's go check out his farm. Hey everybody, we are here with Jared Smith, and he's going to be telling us all about his farm today and showing us all around. So thank you, Jared, so much for having us out and letting us tour your farm. And we'd love to hear a lot more about it.
All right. Yeah, thanks for coming out. I appreciate it. As you guys heard, I'm Jared, and I'm the owner of Jared's Real Food. And right now we're standing in our main production field. Everything out here it's grown in permanent beds, and we're definitely a no-till operation. Really, our whole focus here is soil building. That's always the number one priority, is to focus on the health of the soil.
Absolutely.
And from the beginning, that's always been kind of our outlook here. It's very much a holistic operation.
How long have you been operating here on this field?
So this field's been in production for about, I want to say 6 or 7 years now.
Wow.
And somewhere in between that. Essentially the whole time it's been no-till.
Wow.
We had a tiller for the first few months, but really we got away from that really early on.
Why didn't you want to till?
Well, part of it wasn't super philosophical. It was actually the fact that I had a really old, crappy tiller.
Yeah.
And it just kept breaking down on me, and I was getting sick of trying to fix it all the time.
Yeah. I get sick of fixing stuff too.
Yeah.
I know the pain.
So that was part of it. But I think really just there's a process of learning about soil health. And I really wanted to be as non-interventionist as possible with the soil, and really just let it do its own thing, more or less.
Using natural systems to help develop the soil.
That's right, yeah.
Awesome.
So we did a lot of cover cropping and really trying to replicate the natural process of soil building in nature, and really trying to promote more of a more fungal activity in our beds. So a lot of times when you till, that's part of the issue, is that you're really disturbing all the microorganisms in there, all the life, and a lot of times it becomes a very bacterial-dominated soil if you're just completely tilling all the time.
Right.
And here, over time, we've kind of turned it more into a perennial system. It's not just a market garden. We also have woody herbs and trees here.
Excellent.
And so we're very much trying to promote more fungal activity as well.
Awesome. Well, yeah, we're really looking forward to seeing all the different systems you have, especially those perennial systems. Now, you said that you started out here 6 or 7 years ago. Just because I was a part of this farm for the first couple of years, I know that we didn't start here to begin with. So how did the farm get started originally?
Yeah, so originally it was very much more of a garden-based farm. We actually built 25 raised beds with lumber, with redwood. And we filled them up with compost, and it was really kind of based more on like square foot gardening and vertical gardening, because at the time that's that's really what I had read, and I was just starting to get into like Elliott Coleman style market gardening, and so yeah, like the really early stages were just those permanent boxes that we got set up.
Very cool. I think it's going to be really interesting and informative for you guys to kind of see how everything was started and the whole progression to where now he's doing it on a very large scale, you know, totally professional. And it's just going to be a great for you guys to see kind of the whole journey, so you can see what's possible if you want to get started in farming yourself. So let's go over to the alleyway over there, and let's go check out the raised beds and all those things that you were talking about.
All right, so now we're standing here in the original alleyway where we started the farm. And this is in between two chicken buildings. This is actually my grandpa's old chicken farm. It used to be full of chickens, and this whole alleyway was just vacant, just dirt. There was nothing in here. And when it was finally decided that I wanted to start farming, my uncle gave me the opportunity to start building beds in here. And at the time, you know, that was 8 years ago now, and we really had no idea how this was going to turn out, if there would be enough interest or anything like that. So what we did initially is we built these first 10 beds up front here, and we planted them out. And I think a couple months later, once stuff was ready, I just told all my friends and family, and we had a big opening day. And actually we had a really good turnout. People were really excited about what we were doing, and there was a lot of interest with that. And so we decided to continue expanding, and we built 15 more beds all the way down to almost the end of the alleyway. But we also left room for sprouting tables. So like with the soil blocking that we were talking about, most of that all goes on here in the alleyway. It's a little more protected from animals and I guess just weather too. So in the second section here, you'll notice that this trellis is built here on every single, all 15 beds. And this was very much inspired by some of the early vertical gardening books that I was reading. And I was really trying to maximize the area that we had. So during the summertime, we grow a lot of vertical stuff here, like tomatoes and cucumbers and different varieties of green beans.
That's awesome. So these trellises are 8 years old?
Yeah, these are 8 years old.
Wow.
It's raw, untreated wood. So they're kind of getting a little bit old looking here, but they're still holding on really well and working.
So that's really cool, guys. So this has been here for 8 years, in production for 8 years, and the wood is still really good.
Yeah, so this is redwood, and I think probably the best woods are redwood or cedar, they say, for like raw wood lasting long in, to the elements. Other woods break down quicker. You'll also notice that, in particular, this time of year in December, there's very little sun in the alleyway. The sun gets very low in the sky, and we really only get sun on this north side. And so we got to really think about that and switch the crops up. And over the years, I've found that lettuce and cilantro and a lot of the leafy greens like kale and chard, they all do very well in a shady environment. So you'll notice right now, like in this bed, we got kale and chard going. The bed next to it is a full bed of chard. And literally, this south side of the bed is not getting any sun this time of year. And the chard is still growing very well. It's super robust and healthy. There's no stretching issues.
All right, Jared, so what do we have going on here?
Yeah, so right now we got mat soil blocking, and this is our process for starting transplants. Certain crops we direct soil, put the seeds directly in the beds. Other crops we start this way and grow them for about 4 to 6 weeks, and then plant them into the beds.
Excellent. So you start all your transplants in soil blocks.
We do, yeah.
Awesome. And why do you use soil blocks?
So soil blocking, I got introduced to that through Elliott Coleman, and really it's kind of a way to not have to use a bunch of plastic trays, but also it reduces transplant shock. You know, the plants don't get the spiralized roots going on, and it's cool because we can just make our own with the mold there.
So it really increases the health of the plant, you say?
Definitely. You know, back in the day we used more of the plastic trays.
Mm-hmm. Like the plug trays and...
Yeah, like plug trays and stuff. And you'd get more of the spiralized roots, and also the plants would take longer to rebound after transplanting them. Whereas with these soil blocks, I hardly ever see any shock at all. Like, it's literally, you know, you're not disrupting the roots at all. They're all really compact in that block, and when you stick it in the ground, they just expand out from that. So it works really well.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I've had the same experience, you know, obviously growing with you here and now in my own market garden. The soil blocks are like they are the best way to start seeds. Basically, if you care about the health of your plants and you want to have the least amount of transplant shock, this is the best.
Yeah, I think
so it's cool. I like that we're showing that Jared's doing the soil blocks even on a larger scale. Jared's at about 2 acres right now of production. So you might even notice Jared has the professional soil blocker here. So this soil blocker does 12 at once, and the soil blocker that you've seen me use only does 4 at a time. And actually Jared gave me that one, so thank you, Jared. And but this, you know, on a larger scale, you want to have the bigger setup. So he's able to do a whole tray of blocks here. That's about 64 blocks. If you're interested more in soil blocks, I'll be making a video soon about how to do this.
Alright, so now we're in the back of the alleyway, and this is pretty much just a straight up nursery area. On the north side here, we have a lot of tables set up with soil blocks, and just a lot of different sprouts. Like for instance, we have the cabbage here, we got some onion starting to sprout, we've got little baby cilantro coming up. You know, a lot of different crops that we plant here. And then on the south side here, this is all perennial crops that we've propagated here on site, and with the intent to plant out into the production field at some point. So we have different woody herbs here, like rosemary, a little bit of thyme and mint, but mostly trees at the moment. We got, these are different rootstocks that we're growing. This one in particular is St. Julian. It's a very old ancient plum that is a good rootstock. We'll be grafting new varieties of trees onto those rootstocks and starting new trees. So a rootstock is a completely separate tree that is grown specifically for its growth qualities. So some are have very strong root systems. They're good with drought tolerance. Others are better in like really wet soils. So it kind of depends on your area what style rootstock you want to use. Some people are into dwarfing their trees. They don't want a full-size tree, and so they'll use a rootstock that is dwarfing, and it will only allow the tree to maybe get, you know, 50%. It just depends on the rootstock, but it won't get full size. So all those things are influenced by what rootstock you pick. But we're also propagating pomegranates. Pomegranates, typically people don't use rootstock. They just take cuttings from the actual tree, and they propagate very readily. Whereas if you were to do that with stone fruit, and you took a cutting and stuck it in the ground, it wouldn't grow. But certain trees like pomegranates and like figs in particular, they readily propagate themselves. So you can just take a cutting and stick it in the ground. These are our apple trees, and we're using the M111 rootstock, which is almost a full standard tree. I think it's about 80%. A really good all-around rootstock. It's good for both sandy and overly moist soils. You'll see where we grafted the rootstock down here, and the new growth came up out of here and has grown this much just this year. And we're reaching the point of year where these are going to go dormant. So you can see the leaves are starting to turn yellow, and they're going to start falling off. And,
just like that.
Yeah, just like that. And so once they're dormant, it's a good time of year to go plant them. Go stick them in the ground in their final spot. Or, you know, these are easier to plant because they're already in pots, but a lot of them we just have in nursery beds. And so we really wait for them to be dormant then, because we have to go in and dig them out physically with a shovel and move them. And they're much more resentful of that when they're not dormant. So it's the best time to wait for dormancy for that.
Awesome. That's an excellent planting tip. Thank you, Jared.
So we've taken all the stuff that we've started here, and we've then taken it out to the main production field and planted them into their final spots.
Excellent. So this is kind of the nursery area, and then eventually everything moves out to the field. So that's including the transplants here and the perennials that he's starting. Let's go over to the main 2-acre field and check out the whole production system over here. So tell us a little bit more about your crops, and what are your staple crops? What are the main things that you are growing right now in this season?
Well, right now we're in the heart of the cool season, the winter season in San Diego.
Okay.
And we can grow year-round here. So it's literally just a matter of changing which crops you're growing. So this time of year, it's very much leafy greens and a lot of root crops. We do a lot of cilantro this time of year. Cilantro tends to bolt pretty easily, so it likes the cool weather very much so. We do a lot of brassicas like the cabbage, and do a little bit of broccoli, a lot of kale, a lot of chard, a lot of beets, a lot of carrots, tons of lettuce. Grow different varieties of baby greens and mix it together for a salad mix. It's really nice.
Excellent.
We do a lot of radishes, a lot of onion. We plant garlic this time of year. You can see in this bed right here. And the garlic we plant in October, and it's usually ready around May. So that's kind of a more long-term crop. But everybody loves garlic, so we grow a little bit of that. But most of these crops turn over much quicker. They're more like 2 to 4 months until they're ready to harvest, whereas the garlic's going to take a little longer than that.
Cool. So you got a nice variety of, sounds like, really quick crops like your greens, and you're also, since you're on a larger scale, you can do a lot of these bi-rotational or longer growing things like the cabbage and the broccoli. And I notice on some of your beds here, it looks like you have long growing and short growing crops together. Could you tell us a little more about what's going on there?
Yeah, that's right. So we do intercropping here at the farm. I guess companion planting, you could also call it that. We like to grow the cabbage with lettuce.
Okay.
And if we walk a little further down here, you can see the remnants of that in this bed. If you look at the gaps in between the cabbage when it's smaller, there's enough room for a head of lettuce to grow. So when we plant this bed, we plant cabbage and lettuce in all the gaps where there would normally just be nothing growing. And then we come in and we harvest the lettuce, and when it's ready, because it's always ready before the cabbage is ready.
Right.
And so we come in and we get a nice harvest on lettuce, get it out of there, and then there's plenty of space for the cabbage to then develop, and you get a whole second crop. You're literally getting 2 crops off of one bed.
Right.
Whereas when I first started farming, I would just do like a bed of cabbage, and then there'd be all this wasted space. So that's been something that's really beneficial to really up the production level and to be able to produce more, is doing stuff like this, intercropping. We also do intercropping with carrots and lettuce. That works very well too. And I can show you another bed.
Woo!
This bed in particular was originally just a straight carrot bed, but it had poor germination. Or actually, I think what happened was it germinated good, but then some insects came in and kind of chewed up and made gaps in the bed. So instead of taking a hit and just having nothing there, we come in and we fill the gaps with lettuce, so that we still get, we're still maximizing our beds. And as you can see, they grow well together, and it's an absolutely beautiful bed.
Yeah, it is gorgeous.
Yeah, the carrots are just flourishing amongst the lettuce. We got different varieties of red leaf and green leaf, and we're also doing some butterhead in here. So there's 3 different kinds of lettuce in here. The carrots that we planted are all different heirloom varieties. So there's probably at least like seven different varieties of vegetables in this one bed.
Wow.
So that's kind of cool too.
Very neat. That's a great technique. So even though, you know, the bugs or whatever took out your crop, you're coming in here and replacing it rather than losing that profit or having to redo the whole carrot bed. You're saving time and just putting in the lettuce.
That's right.
So yeah, I really love this technique.
All right, so I wanted to show you guys part of my irrigation system here. Everything on the farm is drip irrigated, and so we're trying to maximize our water here. We're in Southern California. It's a very valuable resource, and we don't want to waste water. So we've got everything on drip, and we run 3/4 main line to all our beds. So this manifold right here, tapping into the main line, was a design I came up with just so that I could install an on-off to each bed, so I have more control over which beds get water, which don't. The on-off is hooked up to another 3/4 inch pipe that has the actual drip lines connected to that. This is an old farming trick that I learned from an old farming mentor of mine. Shout out to Mark at the La Mesa Farmers Market. I used to go and bug him every Friday, but he taught me how to do this. And it's basically a technique of just punching the line directly into the drip line.
So Jared's got, this is 1/4 inch line? What is this?
This is actually,
looks like it's bigger than that.
This is an old diameter line. They don't even make this size anymore.
Oh, whoa.
I can't find it anywhere.
Wow, interesting.
So since, you know, these are some of the original beds, but since then I've switched over to 1/4 inch.
So just to kind of explain how you made this, it looks like you punched directly into the line and there is no coupler or connecting valve that you buy.
Yeah, that's the beauty of this method, is that it saves you money having to buy the connector piece. And literally I just took a hole punch and I punched it in.
Okay, so just with an irrigation punch?
Yeah, I just started a little tiny hole with that.
Okay.
And both sides of the line I cut at an angle like this.
Oh, okay.
So it has more of a point.
Okay.
And then once it has a point like that, it's easier to wedge it in. It's still kind of a tricky thing. You kind of get a feel for it after a while.
But it gives you a watertight seal.
But it's literally a watertight seal.
Wow,
on that, yeah.
That's amazing.
And then you just take the drip line and I punch a hole into the drip line. I usually just use the end of my clippers right here. I just start a little tiny hole.
Okay.
And then the same deal with the angled cut there. You can just stick it right into the hole and kind of wedge it in. Now, with this one, usually there's a little bit of leakage, so I try to have it start up in the bed.
Okay.
And so when it leaks, it doesn't matter because it's still getting...
It's like the first emitter.
It's like, yeah, it's a really slow leak. It's basically like having an emitter right there.
Nice.
So it's really not an issue at all. I also cut a little sleeve like this that keeps it all in place.
Gotcha.
So that goes first, slide that on.
Okay.
Then you slide in the drip tape. And then I fold it over a couple times over on itself.
Okay.
And that keeps it in place. And then you slide the sleeve over.
Wow. That is really
Just like
cool.
that.
Thank you for showing us that, Jared. So this is the cheapest way to set up drip on a large scale. So he's just using a line, drip tape, and connecting it to the main line. That's it. There is no couplers. So this is just a really fantastic technique, and thank you for showing us, Jared. So could you tell us a little bit more about your perennial systems and hedgerows and stuff that you're doing out here?
Yeah, definitely. So this actually is the first perennial spot that we installed at the farm. If you look further up, it's more just a standard market garden. So I started reading more about having more diversity within your farm and how that very much is beneficial for natural pest control. And so I wanted to start planting more diversity with different herbs and flowers and trees amongst the annual beds, and really with the intent of trying to attract in more beneficials but also just to provide more variety at the farm. I have more, now I'll have more fruit to sell and more herbs and just different varieties of things to offer customers. So it's really good for that too. But this was the first area we built, and this here in particular is an apple guild. So the dominant species in here are going to be the apple trees, and each one of these apple trees are a different apple, and they're all old, traditional American apples. A lot of them are stem back to the Johnny Appleseed era, like the late 1800s, and they're just varieties that, for whatever reason, weren't grown commercially, and they fell out of favor, and so they're really not grown too much anymore. So we're trying to kind of specialize more in the rare apples and bring people fruit that they can't find at the store. So this tree in particular is Aunt Rachel, and you can see it's getting ready to go dormant here. It's starting to, the leaves are starting to turn yellow. We installed a berm here around the whole area, and that has the effect of capturing the rainwater when it rains. So all the water that hits in here is just absorbed in to either the berm or to the area where the trees are growing, and the water just settles in instead of running off and escaping the landscape.
Great. So you're using this as not only to increase the diversity of your farm, increase the products that you can offer, but it also helps to collect water as well.
It's also capturing rainwater.
Wow. So there's many functions that this has.
This field in particular, we planted a lot of asparagus in the berm. Earlier on, we had a lot more herbs, but the asparagus seemed to dominate and kind of take over a lot of the areas of the berm. And the asparagus now is also going dormant. You can see it's turning yellow and it looks like it's dying, but it's literally just going dormant, and it'll all die back and look like nothing's here in the berm for maybe a month or so, and then it'll start re-emerging again, and in the early spring.
So do you cut this back once it goes dormant?
Yeah, so a lot of times it turns yellow and just kind of dies on its own, and it's easy to rip out.
Okay.
Or you can go in and just cut it out. But yeah, we clear all this vegetation out from the asparagus, and we compost it and turn it back into soil. So it was actually originally planted out more just like a traditional orchard, and we had lines of trees here. We also planted grapes close by on the south side of the trees so that they would still get sun even when the sun starts getting lower in the sky. But then later on, a few years went by, and there was this open space in between the trees, and we decided to install beds in between the trees. So it's almost like a form of alley cropping, kind of on a smaller scale though. So initially, these beds were built as nursery beds, and like I was talking about earlier, how we do the rootstock grafting, we had these full of trees. So different kinds of apples and stone fruit.
So just planted right in the beds right here.
Yeah, directly into these beds. And then a lot of the trees that are out in the perennial systems now were actually started in these beds originally.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So a lot of the trees out here you created basically from rootstock and grafting them with your own scion wood.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah, we started with a handful that we bought ourselves, or just collecting scion woods from friends or wherever we could get them. And yeah, most of the trees here were actually grafted by me or by you. So yeah, it's kind of cool to see the whole process of that.
Yeah.
And then to see the trees get bigger over the years, it's pretty special. Now these beds are just full of annual crops. 3 of them are different phases of radishes. New French radish over there.
Excellent.
It's a breakfast radish. And this bed's onion. This is a Spanish bulb onion. But also with this area, you'll notice all the trees are different varieties. So there's apple trees in here, there's plum trees, there's nectarines, there's pomegranate, there's also citrus. And you'll notice we have some agribond on the citrus, and that's to help out with the frost this time of year. We get a little bit of frost and freezing here, so I mean nothing crazy, but enough to damage the citrus. So we've been trying to use that to help with that.
Excellent. Well, the next thing, we're standing right next to it, that I wanted us to talk about is how you create your own soil.
Everything at the farm here, we turn back into soil. There's nothing that goes to waste. So when we go in and we harvest a bed, depending on the crop, there's usually some leftover plant material that's there. And we take that and we pile it up here in this compost area, and we get it wet. And I come in with the tractor and we flip it at least once a week.
Okay.
And this pile actually we just put together, and we've been adding just different beds, different leftover beds, and different cardboard boxes, recyclable boxes, egg cartons, kind of any organic material that we can get our hands on to turn back into soil. We'll throw in here.
How much outside compost are you having to buy every year? About?
So yeah, we still buy from a local compost producer, and I would say it's probably about half of our production.
Nice.
We still buy.
So, but I mean, you guys, I think that's pretty impressive that on this 2-acre market garden, he's able to provide half of his own compost. You know, he's using that to re-inoculate and add nutrients to all his beds. He's making soil blocks with that. So that's pretty awesome that he's able to pull that off here. You know, after Jared turns all that with a tractor and adds moisture and does all that process, now here's his final product that he's making, and it is pretty impressive, you guys, I have to say. Smells amazing. You know, about how long before you can create a pile like this? What's your process like?
Yeah, well, I think that depends on how often you're flipping the pile.
Okay.
Typically, I like to play it safe, and I'll compost my pile for at least 6 months or so. But I know there's guys that, you know, flip it and process it within a couple months. I guess I just want to make sure everything's fully composted and broken down.
It looks really broken down.
Yeah.
Like compared to my compost, I've always got a lot of extra carbon and things I have to filter out. But this looks so clean and good, you know, you could use it just right away.
Yeah, this batch turned out really well. So every time we harvest and the bed is done, we then come in and we add a fresh new layer of compost to every bed. And that really regenerates the microbes, or helps replenish microbes in the soil and keep good balance. And also adds nutrients for the plants as well, obviously.
Love what you're doing here, trying to, you know, recycle as much of your waste, put it back into the system, and trying to reduce your inputs. I think this is a really impressive model.
I think that's really important for small-scale farming, is to really, you know, cut down your overhead as much as you can, and try to be as regenerative as you can, because it's not only good for the soil, it's going to save you money too. So I think it's an important thing to try to use every last bit of material here that we can to turn back into healthy soil. That's always been one of our foundational practices here. Part of having a diverse landscape and having all these perennial crops and flowers to address, you know, pest issues and to bring variety to the farm. It's also to help with local pollinators. So we've also brought in bees. We've got a couple beehives here to help us with pollination for all our tree crop. You know, there's the added benefit of getting honey. But really, the reason they're here is really for pollination. And
so you've got some nice sunflowers here.
Yeah. So a lot of beekeepers, you know, during the time of year where there's not a whole lot of nectar flow, they will literally just feed their bees honey. And I've been trying to get away from that. We've pretty much treated these bees just like wild bees. I do very little with them. I never feed them sugar. What we do is we plant beds full of flowers and herbs that they like. So you'll see here this bed of sunflowers literally right next to the hives. They don't have to go very far.
Yeah, not far at all.
But if you were here earlier in the year, we had much more flowers for them. A lot of sunflowers. We let our basil beds, we'll harvest our basil beds for however long that the leaf quality is good. And then after that, we let it flower for a few weeks, and the bees just go nuts on it, just load up. And then we also do that with cilantro. They love cilantro. So there's different annual crops that we just kind of let flower for the bees as well. And so far, it's worked really well. I haven't had any issues.
That's really
with
cool.
them dying. I think they have plenty of food.
That's really cool.
And it's looking, in the years past, we've had issues with ants attacking the hive and trying to take them over, but that hasn't happened at all recently. So they seem very robust and strong from the local pollen and nectar that they're getting around here.
Wow.
And of course, they're going beyond just this site too, but we're definitely helping them by growing stuff, growing food for them too. And
very cool.
And these hives are also foundationless.
Okay.
So all the frames are completely just frames, and the bees were allowed to fill out the whole frame on their own naturally.
Right.
Whereas most of the commercial beekeepers use foundation, and it's like a preset comb that the bees then build off of that. But it's interesting because naturally bees build their comb smaller than what the commercial standard is for foundation. And I think that's having an effect on the bees as far as different pest issues that they're experiencing. In particular, varroa, people think that could be influenced because of the bigger foundation cells. But just in general, we're trying to treat these bees like a wild hive, just letting them do their thing, letting them be natural. And so part of that is just letting them build their own comb completely. And so that's another part of how we do the bees as well.
It's a really great point. Cool. Let's take a look at your hive stands, because I really like the way that you built them.
Yeah, so we decided to build these because mostly we were having issues with the Argentinian ants going in and trying to overtake the hive. And the closer, like if the hive was directly on the ground, it'd be really easy for the ants to come up in it. So we raised the hives up off the ground with these stands.
Nice.
And we use either diatomaceous earth. It's all wet right now because it just rained, so you can't really see it as well. But usually we'll have a little bit of diatomaceous earth around all four of the legs.
Okay.
And we also put axle grease. That's why it looks all dirty. This is all axle grease so that no predators or other insects can walk up and get to the hive up here. So it's really a form of protection for the bees too. It keeps them up off the ground. And it also helps with airflow. So you get much more airflow through here.
Okay.
And we have the screened bottoms to our hives. And so in the summertime, it really helps get more ventilation in the hives.
So we've got a brand new bed here, and Jared's going to show us how he preps his beds.
We've already come in here and we've stripped out whatever was remaining from the harvest. I think this was we had snow peas going in here, so we harvested them all and then took the vines out, and now they're in the compost pile. And then we went and we got wheelbarrows full of our ready-to-go compost, already broken down, nice healthy soil. And we just put a nice thin layer on the top here. Just kind of spread it all out with the rake.
How many wheelbarrows would you do for a bed this size?
For this size bed, probably about maybe 3 wheelbarrows.
Okay, nice.
Like 2 to 3. It kind of depends too, like how much the bed has sunk.
Okay.
If it's looking pretty low, I might add more. If it's looking pretty tall, around the size I want it, I may add less.
I see.
Typically, probably about 3 for this size bed. Usually once a year, we come in with a broad fork to aerate the soil, and also to let some of this new compost be able to filtrate down deeper into the soil where the plant roots are going to be. But really, this is just a once a year thing, maybe twice a year. Maybe we'll do it before a carrot crop to try to loosen the bed a little bit more than normal. But typically I would come in with a walking hoe, and that's usually what I would do just to quickly loosen the soil.
Okay.
But we're a no-till operation, so we don't use a tiller. It's either the broad fork or walking hoe. See, the tines on this thing are about 14 inches. They go very deep down into the soil. And then you pull back, and it just very gently kind of brings the soil up. And you can see some of that new compost kind of falling down. And it just makes it much more fluffy and ready to plant for the plants. So
cool.
Essentially, if you're going to be doing no-till, you got to have a broad fork. Broad fork is one of the most important tools that I have at the farm. It really keeps me from having to use a tillage.
And which broad fork is this?
So this is the Meadow Creature.
Very cool.
And I think this is probably one of the better ones on the market.
Absolutely.
If I had to say.
14-inch tines. It's all steel.
Yeah.
And how long have you owned this broad fork?
I've had this for, I think, 6 or 7 years now.
Awesome.
And it still looks pretty much brand new. I mean,
when we first came out to this field, there weren't permanent beds like this. What did we try? What was our first attempt?
those buckets,
yeah. Tell me just how bad the soil was.
So yeah, this field was literally just riddled with rocks and weeds when we first started.
Very hard ground.
And the soil itself was almost like cement. Take a shovel to it and it just bounces off. Like it was brutal. A lot of clay in the soil. And because of that, our initial plantings out here, we literally had plants in 5-gallon buckets, and we would just dig a hole big enough. We had an auger, and we just punched a line of holes and stuck these buckets in the ground. And surprisingly, it actually worked pretty well. We were growing melons and different squash, and it worked really good. But it was a lot of work. It was labor intensive.
Yeah.
And so we got away from that pretty quickly.
It was a good experiment in beginners farming and experimenting. I just want to express to you guys how amazing it is. You know, the soil was so bad that we weren't even considering growing in it. You know, that's how concretey it was. But I want to show you now, there was buckets right here. This is literally the row where some of the worst soil was. And now look what Jared's able to do. 14 inches all the way down. This is what happens when you build your soil and consistently work with nature. So you can change any type of soil into the best soil you've ever seen. I think that's what the big message, I guess, of both of our farming styles and all these people that are trying to do regenerative growing is that if you follow the patterns and the rules of nature, you can do everything naturally. You don't need to bring in a lot of outside inputs, and you can have the healthiest crops ever. All right, everybody, that is it for today's episode of the farm tour with Jared Smith of Jared's Real Food. We hope you enjoyed the episode today and that you guys learned a lot of new things about farming. Thanks again to Jared for having us out here. It was a real honor and privilege.
Absolutely.
And be on the lookout for the next video, and I'll be doing another video with a new farmer soon. So hope you guys have a wonderful day and week. Happy gardening and farming out there. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. See you later.